Hello, thanks for joining us. The webinar will begin soon. Hello, and welcome to our webinar on maximizing youth voice in the settings of conference and community presentations. We hope you'll learn more about partnering with youth in research and communities today. So we have a lot of participants on this webinar, so we'll be keeping the phones lines muted for the presentation. To listen, you can either use your computer speakers or call in and use the phone to listen. So we've set aside time at the end of the webinar for a live Q&A. So feel free to type in questions as they come up throughout the call, and we'll answer them at the end. Use the question box on your control panel to do this. And now it's time for us to begin. We have a few presenters with us today. Here at the Adolescent Health Initiative in Ann Arbor, we have 4 young people and 2 adult advisors, and we are joined by Marie Abraham from the Institute for Patient Family Centered Care, all the way from Connecticut. We're quickly going to pop on the webcam so we can say hi.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Right, so much closer. Okay. Yeah. Hi, I'm Paige. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I have been part of, this is my first year with TAC at the Adolescent Health Initiative. Some of my past experiences working with youth have been with a local teen center called the Neutral Zone, as well as working with the Pride Youth Theater Alliance. Yeah, and I'm excited for this webinar.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zakia. I've been a part of TAC for going on 3 years now, and I've worked in a multitude of groups with young people in my community with many different genres beyond just health.
I'm AK. I use the pronouns they, them, and theirs. I am 21 years old. This is my 5th year on TAC, and other than TAC, I've done a variety of different things working with young folks, primarily facilitation around social identities.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sakina Rahman. I am 19 years old. I've been a part of TAC for going on 3 years now, and I've been working with youth program. I've been working as a youth participant in youth programs for about since I was 14, maybe. Yeah, 14. And some programs I have worked with are the Cornell Health Center, TAC, TAG at the library, and a bunch of other groups in my community.
Great. So I'm the disembodied one voice you're hearing off the side, right there. My name is Craig Van Kempen. I use he, him, and his pronouns. I am with the Adolescent Health Initiative as a program specialist. And previously I was a clinical social worker and a health educator at the Corner Health Center Adolescent Health Center in Atlanta. And we've got Natalie over here who's telling us that the audio is not the best. Yeah, it's good. All right. And Natalie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Sahaki. I use she, her pronouns. I'm working on the behind the scenes controls. I am one of the co-facilitators for TechTech. This is my second year with these amazing folks, and I'm excited to be here today.
All right. Marie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Marie Abraham, and I work for the Institute for Patient and Family Centered Care, which is based in Bethesda. But as Craig said, I'm in Connecticut, and happy to and honored to be joining this great crowd. I have for a long time been very interested in research with typically underrepresented communities, and youth is for sure one of those underrepresented communities. And I've learned a lot from this work in addition to my other work. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So here's what to expect today. We're going to look at some of the things that are challenging when adults partner with youth, and we'll share some things we've seen done that worked well from the beginning to the end of our presentation or project. We'll also be sharing a guide that includes these tips, so you'll have some concrete ideas and resources. Finally, we'll share some different ways adults and youth can present information, from the classics to the creative, and we'll end with some time for discussion. So let's get started.
Moving on, we're going to read a scenario that includes a number of pitfalls or common problems that pop up when adults partner with youth. As Paige reads it, be listening for these problems, but also try to imagine how the young person telling their story might feel along the way.
A month or so ago, I was asked to help present a presentation on vaping, juuling, and electronic cigarettes.
All right, sorry. A month or so ago, I was asked to help present a presentation on vaping, juuling, and electronic cigarettes by some researchers that reached out to a teen advisory council I am on. To be honest, I was really excited, so I volunteered right away. It was a little nerve-wracking, but I thought it would be a great experience and maybe something I could put on my resume one day. And plus, I'm around so many people in my high school, including some friends that actually use Juuls and vapes and whatnot, that I thought I would have some real-life examples and insights to bring to the presentation. Unfortunately, it did not go as well as I'd hoped. It all started with the planning. We tried to meet beforehand. I gave them various times that I was free after school and between our other activities I'm a part of. I even gave them some weekend times, but nothing seemed to work out. This made me a little more nervous. I'm someone that likes to prep, but figured that there would be some time beforehand to think on what I wanted to say. On the day of, after finally finding someone that would drive me to the 45 minutes out to where the conference was being held, I arrived about 30 minutes before the presentation. I was greeted by the two researchers and another youth, all of whom I've never met before. They automatically started talking about their presentation and suggested things that we should say, all of which aligned with points they were trying to make. Even though I had some personal stories that didn't exactly match up to these points, they made it seem like this was not the place to tell those stories. As we entered the presentation room, I was really surprised. There were so many people there, and they were all very, very well dressed. I definitely did not expect this, and it put me a little on edge. Honestly, I was nervous. After the main presentation was over, there was a time for the audience to ask us questions. The thing is, the presenters answered most of the questions themselves. They would either answer the question and ask if we had anything to add, or just answer it completely. I really wanted to use some of my personal experience. I honestly thought that there was some good information, but at that point, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. Soon the presentation was over. The researchers thanked us and left to go talk with some people, and that was that. I can say that at least I got the experience, but honestly, I wasn't even paid for my time and I missed work to be there. It left me with a feeling like, why was I even there? I hope one day I'll be able to use my ideas in a better way on a different presentation.
Okay. So lots of mistakes were made in this scenario, and we realized that it may not feel that realistic for an adult to mess up that badly, but you'll be surprised. Each of these mistakes were based on things that have happened to us in real life, and we hope it helped you think more about how it can feel for a young person to have a negative experience or even just miss an opportunity to really contribute in a meaningful way.
All right, so we're going to take you all through what went wrong there. So here are some of the common pitfalls that we saw kind of within some of that information. Like, we sure you have lots of ideas, and we're going to cover all of the things that we saw throughout that entire example as we go through this list here.
We all have busy schedules, and teens are often in school during the workday. Adults need to be the ones to accommodate here, which might mean scheduling a planning session in the evening or even on weekends.
As you just heard, there are lots of logistics that can easily go wrong. We realize that projects don't always have a budget to pay stipends to youth partners, but just as adults receive compensation for their time and expertise, youth deserve the same. If you partner with youth through an establishment, youth council, they might be able to cover stipends if your organization can't. There's a lot to coordinate, but it's worth the effort. Because if any of these points are addressed, things can fall apart. The presenter in our scenario was lucky that the youth was able to get a ride for the 45-minute drive.
We know it can be challenging for adult professionals to include content that might be more academic or lectury while still making time for youth. Try to be creative about how you present this information, or keep it as brief as you can. If you have the opportunity to partner with youth, make the most of it. Make time in the agenda for the youth to respond to participants' questions, and expect that youth perspectives may not always align with your point of view. Remember that youth are experts on their own lived experiences.
This one speaks for itself. It can be hard if you're partnering with youth you haven't met before, but good planning can help. The more trust or connection you have with youth, the better.
So in the story we just heard, it sounds like the researchers partnered with 2 youth about vaping and e-cigarettes. While 2 youth is going to be better than none, it's ideal to have a wide range of youth perspectives. For adults professionals who don't necessarily work with youth, it can be hard to recruit a diverse group of youth and much easier to reach out to their colleagues' teenage kids. And we also noticed in that example too, right, that person maybe didn't necessarily have experience with like e-cigarettes themselves. We're kind of going off of their friends' experiences, which again can be another one of the reasons why it's really important to get a wide array of youth experiences.
All right, so now let's test your knowledge. We're going to do a quick poll. We recognize that each of us has different challenges that we face when partnering with youth. We're going to take a second to look over the list of pitfalls that came up in this scenario and choose the ones that you find most challenging. You can choose more than one, by the way. I'll give you a few moments. It looks like a lot of you have trouble recruiting a diverse group of youth. Many have trouble accommodating adolescent schedules. We see logistical barriers such as compensation and such. Now we're going to share the results on the screen.
Okay.
So as you notice, some of these barriers are harder for us to control than others. It's still good to keep them all in mind when we plan for success.
In all of our training and research development, we like to stay focused on strengths and what to do rather than what not to do. Now we're going to share some of the best ways to set yourself up for success. We'll also share some examples of where we've seen this. Maria is going to join us at the end of the discussion as well, and we will add in some more information about partnering with youth on research projects. So we're going to start with recruiting a diverse group of youth. We've already talked about the challenges here, which are helpful to acknowledge, but it's important to get this right. Here's an example from my experience. For the past couple of years, I've been part of a local teen center called the Neutral Zone. And at the Neutral Zone, there are various different programs and groups, including one that's focused on LGBTQ adolescence and activism. And a couple of years ago at Riot Youth, me and the other facilitators realized that the people who were coming to Riot Youth were mostly just white people, despite the fact that overall at the Neutral Zone, there were a lot of people of color, including queer people of color, who were going to other programs but weren't coming to our program. And one of the barriers that we thought might be the reason for this is that Riot Youth met in a different part of the building where not as many of the programs were held, and most of the programs were held downstairs and we were upstairs. So what we decided to do was to create a sort of spin-off program to reach out to students that maybe had never been to that part of the building or didn't even know that Riot Youth existed, including people of color. So we created a program called Queer Cafe, which was an extension of an already existing program, Drop-In, that happened every day in the space. And we just kind of came downstairs and hung out in Drop-In, and it was a little bit more of a laid-back space than Riot Youth was. And it ended up being very successful. We recruited a bunch of new youth, including youth of color, and diversified our program, and it was really well. Yeah. And so you need to, you can't just sit back and expect diverse youth to come to your program or event. You need to actually actively reach out to marginalized youth to make sure that they have, and to make sure that having a diverse group of youth is a highly prioritized goal of your program or project.
Next is to please share with youth what there is to expect. This includes where to meet, what time to arrive, meals that are provided, dress code. See, every year when we have gone to the conference as a TAC group, we spend the meeting before talking about who'll be there, the schedule, how to dress, and we set up a carpooling so that we all can get there. For young people like myself who are very detail oriented, conversations like these really make my work and my focus so much more proficient because I don't have to worry about understanding what's happening because we've already gone through it.
All right, so our next thing that's a part of our that we think is a part of success is going to be making time to prep. So everyone is going to feel more relaxed if they feel like they know their presentation partners beforehand. So that'll be both for you and for the youth that you're working with. And when you truly partner and plan together, instead of just telling youth what they should do, you're going to be building mutual respect and trust that's really going to make your presentation a lot stronger. And youth are experts in their own lived experiences, and a lot of times they're going to already have thought about the topic that you're talking about, and they may just need a little bit more direction on how to talk about their experiences in front of a larger audience, or maybe also in front of a larger audience of professionals. So as a part of the facilitation work that I do, one of the things that we do every year is we do like a little worksheet of what are you most scared of people asking you. It's a facilitation around social identities. And so it'll be like thinking about what are things where it just gets too far into my own personal experience. What do I not feel comfortable sharing? What do I maybe feel comfortable sharing but need to rework it? That's a really, just asking that question of what are you scared of people asking you is a really great way to get at some of those things about like, what am I going to share? What am I not going to share? And maybe how am I going to share that so that youth feel really prepared when they get into the presentation or panel that you're doing.
You want to plan time after the session to debrief, and ideally provide at least 10 minutes after the presentation to have a debrief. Ask the youth how they felt about the presentation and their experience overall, and give descriptive feedback about the strengths instead of saying just good job. Tell them specifically what they did well, and share any follow-ups, including evaluation results or feedback or photos or videos of them that they might enjoy seeing. There's a lot of recommendations about presenting with youth on AHI's starter guide, which is an action-oriented toolkit that we attach to the control panel in this webinar. Feel free to download it so you can reference all these points after the webinar.
All right, so we've been talking a whole lot about like what's going to help like youth feel comfortable going into a presentation, maybe kind of like some of the things that should happen both before and after, but we haven't really focused a whole lot on like what should that actual presentation look like. And so we wanted to give you all a whole bunch of different formats and examples because we want to recognize that there's a whole bunch of creative ways that you can do this and ways where youth can feel like their voices are really being heard. So some of the really great examples that I've seen, so like a couple years ago, I think, at the AHI conference, there was like a youth like poetry group that came in, which was really cool because it's both like them being able to like express their art and also just thinking about the fact that a lot of times youth already have content, right? So thinking about like what have young people already been making and how can we fit that into a presentation, because a lot of times that'll really authentically like speak to what they want to talk about and speak to it in some really awesome ways. And that might even be just like traditional workshops where part of the content is written by young folks. I know for me, when I've had presentations where I've been able to write part of the content, write some of the slides, it's felt a lot more to me like I've been able to get the things across that I wanted to, just because it's kind of already there and already really built into what's being presented.
My sister and I have been able to heavily engage ourselves with theatrical advocacy, and this is able to engage us in memorizing terms and different statistics via our roles, which definitely prepares us for conversations on bigger issues like opioid addiction with so many people, including adults. It's also able to expose us to these different things. We formulate our own ideas. We get to have our own perspectives and opinions on bigger topics that you don't really hear young people being able to speak about with actual education or real world statistics behind it. And it's really expanded our knowledge because of being a part of theatrical advocacy. I would also say for youth who aren't so comfortable with going on stage, I know in my experience, we've also been able to have conversations and dialogue with the youth, just engaging them in conversations about them, about us. Helps us open up more and engage more instead of just talking at us, talk with us. And I would also say having icebreakers or exercises that put us in, and I use this word loosely, but real world scenarios or situations to teach us about certain things or to guide where you want our perspectives to talk about. So yeah, just engaging our youth instead of just talking at them, I would suggest.
Does anyone else have any other examples, or we good? Awesome. So we're actually going to turn it over to Marie now, who's going to share some more examples of successful projects and collaborations.
Thanks. And I want to say, I think these are just terrific ideas. I feel almost superfluous on this webinar because what you just heard, I think, are the key strategies. But I want to share just a few ideas that I've seen in my work from around the country of ways that youth are engaged and share their insights, and they're really bringing about some incredible change and transformation in research in health, the education of healthcare professionals, as well as changing community services in their communities. So one key strategy I see and very powerful is called photo voice. And it seems like a simple process. You have and ask youth to take photos that may be related to a specific question or topic, but it really isn't simple to execute. It has a very specific process to it and requires preparing the youth. And I think we heard how important preparation is. So it also takes time after photos are taken to reflect and select the photos that will eventually be used to produce a final presentation. So here on this slide, you see an example from the Photo ID organization, and this was established by a photographer. Her name is Annie Levy. She's in New York City, and she's implemented this process really eloquently in a number of projects, and you can find several more on her website, and so that's why I've included the URL to her website. But one project that she led engaged youth who were diagnosed with brain tumors in a photo voice project, and this project resulted in a 16-minute video of their very powerful stories about what they experienced with their condition. And it was the video used both their photos as well as their narration, and it really helped in that particular healthcare system's education of doctors and nurses and other people who interact with these youth. So I don't have time to describe the process, and as I said, it sounds simple, but it isn't. But if you're interested in this, and I think it is really powerful, you can find at the bottom of this slide, you see the URL for what's called the Community Toolbox, and they have a chapter in that toolbox that really very expertly spells that out, so you can learn more through them. And next slide, please. I just want to give another example of a photo voice project that took place here near me in Connecticut, in a town called New Britain. And this was a photo voice project that was part of a larger research project. The researchers were conducting a study that they were exploring barriers to physical activity to address the pediatric obesity problem in New Britain. And you can see the process outlined on this slide, but basically they engaged several teens. I think there were 19 teens were engaged in the actual photo voice project, and they engaged them from the beginning. So the teens were part of actually framing the questions, and the teens were provided with a stipend to help support them, and they were very well prepared to use the cameras that they were given, take photos, and what they were looking for was what was challenging to them in their own communities related to physical activity. So they came back together as a group, and they looked at all their photos together, and they reflected on those photos, and then they narrowed them down to just a core set of photos that spoke to their insights. And what they came up with were that the barriers were, there were unsafe neighborhoods, the community pools were closed in their communities. It was depressing and unsightly in their neighborhoods. The exercise centers were costly, but the school gym classes, because they were all grouped together, they felt a lot of shame, and they didn't want to participate in their PE. So they took these and integrated them into the research itself, but also they presented it at a statewide conference on physical activity and nutrition. Next slide, please. But they didn't only do that. They really felt their leadership skills once they completed this project. So they presented to New Britain City Council and offered very specific recommendations for the town to implement to erase the barriers that they were experiencing. So it did result in some significant changes in New Britain. They got separate gym classes in their school. They also got the Y to offer alternate PE So people who still didn't want to go to gym class could go and take the alternate PE at the Y, which meant that they needed a modified bus schedule. So they got that. The bus took them to the Y, and the classes were free to them. And also the dumpster ordinances were enforced in the town. So they really made a tremendous difference in their town, at the statewide level with their Photo Voice project. And next slide, please. And I think everyone who spoke before, they all shared some great ideas about other ways to express their perspective and get it into presentations. And so this approach is a little bit similar to Photo Voice. It's called Visual Voices. And also, what you heard earlier, but instead of photographs, the youth create and share their perspectives through drawing, painting, and writing. And so at the University of Pittsburgh, they actually worked with the youth to select this particular methodology of using visual voice with the youth. And then they engaged the youth in all phases of a research study that was studying adolescent safety. And they really found this to be a very valuable way to inform action after the research was completed. Next slide, please. And in the Bronx, they engaged youth, the researchers did, I should say, in a participatory research project that was looking to find strategies to prevent and reduce mental health and other disparities in the youth population. And so they shared what they learned in an article about partnering with youth. You can see the reference at the bottom of this slide, but I just wanted to share a few of their lessons learned because I think it's really relevant to today's webinar. While youth may not always filter their thoughts, their authentic voice is a huge asset. And I know, as a mom of 3 now adult males, filtering voice is not something that they do, but I was made a better mom probably because of it. But it becomes a great asset to anyone working with youth. There's a need to be flexible in the structures. So for instance, in this work, youth actually created the guidelines that outlined how they were going to participate. But even so, they found that there were things that were outside of their power, some circumstances or events that were really beyond their control, and they couldn't meet the guidelines that they themselves created 100% of the time, so they needed the flexibility. They also needed to be made very transparent to them if there were any restrictions, so if there were any rules or policies that were going to impact their ability to participate, and really it was going to limit their efforts. So they needed that to be made very transparent. They didn't want to be working on something and then have them told that they couldn't do it because of a limitation. They told them that they preferred to have larger tasks being broken down. So many of us adults were used to working maybe once a month on a particular project with our group. So we have a conference call, we meet, and then we go off and we work. But this wasn't really something that these youth wanted. They said that they wanted smaller tasks, and they wanted to meet more often so that they could do small tasks in a short amount of time, get it done, and keep moving on. The other thing that they offer is, and I think you heard this before also, is that youth are incredibly creative and think way outside the box. And so make sure that you're tapping into their creativity. And finally, consider the aging out process for youth, because youth, they grow up and they move on to their other lives, which may not allow them to participate with you and partner with you. But you want to really be able to sustain the relationship and their wisdom. So think about ways that they can still be involved, but not in the way they're involved as they have been. Okay, so the next slide. And finally, I really want to just throw these questions out to you, because these are the questions you can consider asking. So, which youth are you going to work with? So as you think about this, if you haven't partnered with youth before, or you only partnered with one group of youth, who do you have the rapport with? If you don't have any relationships built, are there local youth groups that you can reach out to? If you're in a healthcare system, a hospital, is there a youth advisory group, or are there youth peer support groups? Any group that will allow you to tap into that youth perspective. And make sure that as you're considering working with youth, that you're thinking about meeting them where they're at. Instead of asking them to come to you, meet them in the locations that are convenient for them, and you'll get better engagement. If you need to work with youth like in a completely different organization, so say you're partnering with a community organization where you can tap into youth, then make sure that you've got a key contact there that will help maintain those connections when you're not there and when you're not working with them. And also to make sure that they're the ones who can help give the information to youth that they need to participate. So make sure they know what to expect. If you're doing a presentation, that they can actually get to the location, and that they get compensated for that. And then how can you establish rapport? Well, the best practice is to get to know the youth first before you're starting to plan something with them. So think about ideas to develop a relationship before you actually start to really engage in the work itself. And some of the ideas are on the starter guide, and I know, and some of the ideas you heard from everyone who presented before. And how are you going to ensure that the youth represent the population that you are discussing? And I think we heard a great example about the cafe that was created to get that representation. So make sure that you are seeking out the youth that really do represent the population that you are centering on. And then if you're thinking about presentations, so you have to think about your, who's the audience? What's the tone of the presentation? What's the purpose of the presentation? In that scenario we heard, a lot of this wasn't given thought to. So just think about, is it adult professionals? Is it youth? Is it youth and adults? Who are you going to be presenting to? And what content do you need to include? And I'm sorry, because I forget who offered this, but, think about, what do they know? What do youth want to speak about? And make sure they understand what it is that they aren't comfortable sharing. And I think it's very important to think through, particularly for a presentation, what are the questions that they might get asked after the presentation? So in anticipating what are some of these questions, instead of putting them on the spot at the presentation, everybody's prepared to either respond to questions or be comfortable saying, I'm not comfortable sharing, or I'd rather pass on that question, but that they are very comfortable in the question answer and not only the presentation. So with that, I'm going to stop and I'll turn it over to Craig and Natalie.
This concludes the presentation portion of our webinar.
We'd really appreciate it if you would fill out a brief evaluation. You'll receive an email later today with the link to the survey. If you'd like to stay on, we've set around some time for a live Q&A. If you have any questions or strategies you found useful or you're willing to share, please let us know. And also, you can type your question. Into the question box. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email us if you didn't get a chance to ask it, or if you think of it after the session is over. We can talk more on that offline.
Okay, Natalie here. The first question that we've received is, I feel like I mostly get girls who are interested and not so many boys. I would love to have a more diverse group. Do we have any suggestions or thought about that?
Yes, we do. This is because in another group that I'm in, we just covered this conversation. Unfortunately, I'm going to be my answers and suggestions will really play on the stereotypical implicit biases of what our male or boy-like population do and are. So unfortunately, that's, yeah, if you get what I'm, you can everyone, okay. So moving on to my suggestions, which this advice can be taken generally. First, have visual inviting cues. So in the space that you're in the facility that you're in, people, boys who you're trying to attract, are going to see your facility. And if you show visual inviting cues of their specific identities, they are going to be more inclined to want to know more about you and your organization. Another suggestion is host events targeting your desired population. So you might have an event specific to boys of color. You might have an event specific to boys with no father, specific to boys who have experienced the foster care system. Different events, and at those events, you can talk about your council that you would like more people to join. Also, put yourself in spaces where your desired audience is at. So in other words, go to them. But because a lot of times youth can't make it to your destination, they can't make that time. But if you find the spaces that they are already in and bring yourself to them, you'll get a lot more people who know about you and your organization and will increase recruitment. My last tip is be very open with compensation and benefits of them being in your program, council, this and that, because if they understand how they can make a difference and how the difference also benefit and help them, you're more susceptible to you're more susceptible of keeping their attention and getting them to join you in your organization. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, are there any trainings or materials to help organizations assess their readiness or examine their bias when it comes to the youth population?
So yeah, I can. So again, this is Craig. The Adolescent Health Initiative at adolescenthealthinitiative.org has a couple trainings that tend to address this. One of them is being an askable adult. So it talks about what some of the things you might want to think about when you are dealing with youth. This is more geared towards clinicians, but it's also valid for people who may not identify in that way. Another great organization that has a lot of great resources for this include the Neutral Zone. So neutralzone.org is an organization in Ann Arbor, specifically their Youth Driven Spaces initiative, has a lot of good materials that help look at what it takes to address youth partnership and youth leadership. So those are two great resources we can use. The starter guide also the starter guide that is attached has many other great links for this particular question.
All right, one more question just came in. Thank you. What are the incentives that would assist in recruitment of youth? Thinking about youth that may not already be engaged in leadership and those already engaged.
Hmm. We're thinking, hold on.
I had trouble hearing the whole question. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure. I will definitely repeat that. Okay, so what are incentives that would assist in recruitment of youth? Thinking about youth that that might not already be engaged in leadership and those who are already engaged.
Does anybody else have an answer? Okay, so I have an answer to that. So in my experience, in another group I'm in, we held these events called data dialogues, where we were basically holding focus groups and different activities where we got information from youth about the community. Now, it was really hard getting youth until we brought out the incentive. Every participant will get a $50 gift card. Now, that might not be what most organizations can get for their youth or their participants, but we got that donation, so you can just ask around. But I will say, because we pitched that out to our community, we had a whole bunch of youth joining us that evening, and most of them were youth who have never even been engaged in youth spaces before. And by the end of the event, they said at first, a lot of them said at first I came for the $50, but now I'm interested in becoming a youth leader in my community. I'm interested in having more of these conversations, and I want to make a difference in my community. So incentives that show that you truly value the person will most definitely increase engagement. But if you don't have incentives as accessible like that one, I would suggest going to the spaces where your desired audience is at. I would also add what a lot of people don't realize is that young people also have networks, and they mostly consist of their peers. Using social media, using young people, like getting them ready to go out and invite their family and their friends out to certain things that are happening. And if they know of people who are interested in things, like we just recently had a TAC recruitment, and we didn't get a desirable pool of people that we really were looking for. So we came up with ways to quickly recruit, and it was mostly through our own peers. Like young people have a network too, and it works out. Lastly, I would just like to add, having a safe space, a judgment-free zone, and a challenge by choice policy will help you get non-engaged youth engaged. If you stress that it'll be a space that they can be in comfortably.
Yeah, I want to add on to that too, just thinking about building rapport and trust almost is also an incentive. Thinking about the fact that a lot of young folks don't have adults in their life that they can trust for a whole lot of different reasons. And then thinking about having a trustworthy human being in their life who can serve as a role model or mentor, or who is older than them, is also an incentive in and of itself. I'm all for compensation of young people. I think a lot of times people don't think about it because they're oh, they're 15, we can get them to work for free, which might be true, but you're not going to get a lot of youth from different communities, and you're also not going to be compensating them fairly for their time. So I definitely would say the monetary compensation is important, but also again having that trustworthy adult as almost an incentive to join something is also important. Just a safe place to be with someone they can feel safe around is an incentive in and of itself.
Any other thoughts?
Marie, do you have anything to add? Marie, do you have anything to add? Any questions that were asked?
I think you're asking if I had any thoughts. I think the thoughts that were just shared were really touched on almost anything that I could offer. I do think that offering a variety of activities and going to the youth to ask them, doing finding out what are they interested, how would they want to participate, what are the activities that they want to do, because I think just going with an idea of what you want to be done doesn't allow them to really use their abilities. And I would say, not every individual is going to jump in and want to be a leader. But there are people and youth out there who can execute wonderfully and can, given an idea from one of their peers and a vision, then, they can really react and work on that. So I love the idea of going to the youth and making yourself accessible and available to them rather than having them come to you, and using social media for sure.
Great, thank you. We did have one last question pop in at the end. So this one reads, what about school credit? Do any of your schools give credit for leadership?
So to answer this question, it's actually so funny because my sister and I have a project that we really would like to execute. We don't know when, we need the resources, but we really want to allow for things like leadership to be counted as credible in high school. But until then, I can say that I graduated with a good GPA, but it was not the highest that it could have been. I received almost, I would say 12 scholarships. Most of them were for the community work I did. It wasn't even that I didn't find scholarships for my GPA. It was that there were more scholarships out there for the type of leadership that I was doing. And I didn't even have to wait until my senior year to fill them out. They were handing them out to young people from all types of ages. So I think that that's something that a lot of young people don't know about, is that your work can be rewarded and recognized beyond just where you're at. And so that definitely counts because it builds a resume. My resume is a lot longer than my own professor in my classes in university, and I'm not making that up. I've actually looked their resumes up, and I think that it's really amazing what type of things young people can do in spaces like this.
Yeah, and I think that some schools also offer like kind of senior project sorts of things depending on the way your school is set up. Like I know my school did that, so I did a senior project that was kind of like getting some of my community work to count as course credit. I also know that for some folks, if they happen to be in IB programs, I think that they also have to do kind of final paper, final project sorts of things, and they can kind of roll in their community work to that. So it's less of like, oh, your community work counts for a class or counts for 3 credits or whatever, and more of like, how can you roll it into the academic work that's already being expected of you? But I think like having it be more explicit course credit would be awesome.
Yeah, similarly, similar to what AK said, I go to an early college program, so I'm technically in high school, but I'm taking college classes, and part of that program is that we have to do different community activities, like community involvement and stuff, like volunteering or outreach and things, so that we can count, and it counts as a credit actually. And I have in the past had different various organizations that I've been a part of. I've had my advisors from those organizations sign off on my paperwork and had it count for course credit, which was pretty cool. But I know a lot of schools, especially more traditional public high schools, don't have that. And but I think it's really important. I think that they should.
And I would add also that to think about really shining a light on the engagement of youth and how they're really making an impact in the community, because so often I think the larger community doesn't know the things that are going on. So making sure that media, and if it's appropriate to do a press release or tweet it out to the larger community, any way that you can get the efforts that these youth are engaged in out to a much broader community, so that they're really showcased in there and seen as leaders. Because I see that we might know about it because we're part of it, but others in the community don't. And I think that way to get that recognition and be seen as a leader is just really an enhancement.
All right, thank you all so much. Don't forget that the starter guide tip sheet has a lot of this information. It's attached to your go-to meeting control panel. We recently created this guide, so if you have any ideas that you don't see on there and you want to share with us, please do. We truly, 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 truly appreciate the feedback. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.